Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to be back here in the studio recording with you episode 7 in season 1 of Heaven on Earth. And I was just reflecting how sacred it is to be recording episode 7 as a solo episode, especially since 7 is a really important number for me. It's my life path number. According to numerology, it is my life's work according to human design and gene keys, specifically gate 7. And in numerology, 7 is all about trust and openness. In the gene keys, 7 is really the path of power and leadership. So I'm coming at you with all of that behind me. And it's just a beautiful synchronicity that episode 7 is this solo episode where I'm going to go into some big themes that really do connect to my life's work, my path, my purpose, but also that are deeply, deeply connected to the times that we're living in, even right now. And when I say even right now, I mean today and this month and this year, the cycles that we're really mastering and learning from and receiving from. And remember, there's always a personal piece or component to that, right? Each of us has our own divine timing, and then there's collective timing and collective cycles. And there's a beautiful intelligence, divine intelligence, timing, artistry, and how all that aligns quite perfectly or impeccably in each of our journeys. So for today's episode, I really want to go into what many people refer to from a depth psychology standpoint or archetypal standpoint, the dark feminine. There's different names for this. There's the dark feminine, there's the wild feminine. In astrology, we look to a point based on the position of the moon called Black Moon Lilith that represents how she manifests in our life. And Black Moon Lilith, and actually just Lilith in general, is a really, she's a very important and powerful figure in a lot of folklore and mythology. And I'm really seeking to ground and share and teach some lessons around the dark feminine because, like any darkness or any shadow is a term coined by Carl Jung. I'm trained in archetypal astrology, which is based on a Jungian view of the world, Jungian or depth psychology. Some people refer to it as transpersonal psychology. And even Carl Jung himself, if you're not familiar with him, he was a contemporary and colleague of Sigmund Freud. Our society just chose to embrace Freudian psychology, and I happen to believe that Jungian is a way more accurate read on life psychospiritually, mystically. It's just very aligned with many other wisdom traditions and mystical sciences or wisdom around the nature of life. And so, for those who are less familiar with Carl Jung, he did coin the term shadow, which refers to our parts of ourselves that we choose to keep in the darkness or keep in our unconscious or that we're ashamed of, that we're not really shining a light on or sharing with the world. Sometimes parts of shadow haven't been integrated. You can describe it even as parts of self that we are afraid of or ashamed of, is a better phrase. And Carl Jung also coined the term synchronicity, which is this idea that there's no such thing as coincidences, that there is a method to the madness. And this actually ticks and ties really well with quantum mechanics, which is the field of physics that Albert Einstein himself contributed to. And I like to remind people over 100 years ago, Albert Einstein discovered the power of energy and the energetic basis of matter. And we've had many more developments that honor energy, like wave particle duality in quantum physics and quantum mechanics in that 100 years. However, we haven't quite integrated that in how we see the world. We still are very much operating, at least our systems and mainstream and collective consciousness is very much operating in a 3D version of reality, Newtonian physics, where matter is really all that there is and doesn't acknowledge the energetic components of our world. And I'm going to connect a lot of these dots. So first, let me connect the dot on synchronicity. So synchronicity actually aligns with the quantum view of the world. When I say quantum, I mean quantum physics, quantum mechanics, which is that there's actually a whole subsection called nonlinear physics. And when we look at chaos theory teaches or says that even when we see chaos and utter randomness, there is a rhythm to the chaos and the randomness. We just haven't figured out what it is yet, but we know that there's a rhythm. So the same way that we use pi in mathematics or logarithmic scales to map things, we haven't quite mapped the rhythm or the pattern of the universe, but we know that there is a rhythm in the chaos. And so to me, that's very aligned with synchronicity, that there is a rhythm. If you listen to the last episode, actually, with my dear friend Luisa Lucha, who's a human design gene keys expert and studied physics, she's quite a beautiful example at the intersection of science and mysticism. And she talks about the phrase that she uses in that episode is that all magic has a mechanism. So that's what we're talking about, and that's something that Carl Jung bravely and boldly asserted for us, and many others, I think, in the field of quantum physics. And why am I bringing it up today? Because I want to start gently exploring this archetype, this subject area of the dark feminine and the myth of Lilith. And as we do so, I feel it's very important to remind ourselves of how and where she's coming into our consciousness and how and where she lives in our shadow or unconscious. Now, before we go any further, I really want to describe what I mean by the feminine. So, for people who know me or have worked with me in my practice, either taking a course online or private sessions, you know that one of my favorite tools is archetypes. An archetypal wisdom or an archetypal lens on the world allows us to look at what we can describe as universal patterns or imprints on the world. My favorite archetypes to teach about, aside from masculine and feminine, which are archetypal principles, we can see that when we look at nature, right? Even plants and trees have feminine and masculine aspects. And so do we. We have every human being, no matter what your gender is, has feminine and masculine aspects. These are archetypal qualities. So when I talk about this imprinting of an archetype, I think an interesting example is the king archetype. The king archetype is something that we have seen and experienced beyond time and space on this planet. What do I mean by that? Beyond time in every era, even when there's no connectivity between era, beyond space in every geography, whether we're talking about Asia, China, every civilization, ancient Babylon, Phoenicians, all of them that spoke different languages and existed on different planes, geographic planes, had the archetype of the king. So that tells us that this archetype or this symbol of the king is primordial. It's pre-verbal in a way. It's symbol. Carl Jung really works with the psyche and the psychology of symbols. I think the most foundational archetype on our planet is the archetype of the mother. She is the most primordial. She is present even pre-verbally in Neanderthals and cave people. She is the archetype of this planet. Some people call it Mother Earth or Gaia. It's a very original principle that exists before we speak or even think in some senses. I'm not going to go too far down the path of archetypes, even though they are my favorite subject and they allowed me to completely transform my life. I will explain a little bit more about what I mean when I talk about masculine and feminine archetypes. So I shared that they exist in nature, they're a part of nature, they're a part of us. And we confront them psychologically, at least in the conscious mind, probably mostly around gender. And we could have a whole conversation about gender, how we assign gender, how we identify our gender. But the truth is that all of us have both principles. And we can start to look at the symbols of those principles to understand what we're working with, playing with, discussing, talking about, what we're mining in a way. So a lot of what I teach about, I'm going to give you like a 2 or 5 minute teaser on what I like to teach about masculine and feminine principles and archetypes before we dive into this dark feminine principle. So when I teach about masculine and feminine, I'm teaching about integrating parts of ourselves and bringing both archetypes or both parts or both elements into balance. Every archetype has a shadow expression and a gift expression. And we need to bring the archetype into balance to access the gift. The shadow expression is an unintegrated king or an unintegrated warrior or an unintegrated masculine or an unintegrated feminine, to make it simplistic. And so when I teach about masculine and feminine, I teach about how, like many other dualities or polarities, let's call them, until we bring them into balance, we're not able to feel whole and access our full self and our full power. So my private practice, my business where I see clients one-on-one and I teach courses is called The Power Within. And it's based on this awareness, or you can even say download or awakening, that we are shifting from systems of power over and power under into systems of power with. But we can't have power with until we have power within. And that one of the biggest callings of the time that we're living in is stepping into our power, accessing our power, and actually my favorite phrase is insourcing our power. So how do we access our power? How do we insource our power? It very much is about feeling whole, remembering our wholeness, remembering our divinity so that we're a human self and a divine self or soul self. And being both and. So stepping out of what I call the versus energy. Like I often use the example of battle of the sexes, versus or war energy, into the union or unity energy, right? Oneness, into our inner oneness. And so I teach about masculine and feminine polarity because it's very important in the times that we're living in. And it's one archetypal example of a polarity or duality. We're living in very polarized times. That's one example of how and where we can integrate to find our power. There's a lot more ancient wisdom to this. I'm actually not going to go into that, but I often talk or teach about the field of alchemy and divine union, which is very connected to alchemy. But for the purpose of today, I really want to focus more on the mythology and a depth psychology perspective on the dark feminine, the wild feminine, and Lilith. So why am I sharing this now? Again, for those of you who have been following me or listening to other episodes where I go deeper into astrology, I believe we're living in one of the most transformational periods ever on this planet. I believe we're living through a major evolution of human consciousness. And I have some description or language or scaffolding to ground that for other people. And part of that is the language of the stars. That's the name of my dear friend Louisa's book. And the sacred geometry of astrology. I often like to remind people who maybe somewhere in their head or their psyche are resistant to astrology because of how infantilized it's become in our modern culture, that our planet and its place or position in the solar system revolving around the sun, which is the center of our solar system, which is revolving around a point in our galaxy, the Milky Way, is more real than 99% of stuff we discuss or talk about every day. It's more real than your job. It's more real than the company you work for. That is the most real thing. That our home address is on planet Earth, the third rock from the sun in the Milky Way. And we are revolving a sun, revolving the center of the Milky Way. And there are many other galaxies out there. That's real. And so, without breaking down the entirety of my wisdom and teachings around the new paradigm that's grounding the power with paradigm, the power within reality, I will speak into why the times we're living in are so important and how the dark feminine connects to that. I actually refer to it as the age of Aquarius and Leo. Those are the polarities, the opposite signs. It's really about divine union. It's really about oneness. It's really about feeling whole again. So we're going to feel and be activated around all of our shadow until we can integrate our shadows and bring them back into ourselves, our wholeness, our oneness. What better metaphor for shadow than the feminine? We've been living in very patriarchal systems on this planet for some might say 2,000 years, definitely several hundred, definitely several thousand, possibly more. And what is that about? I'm not going to explain what that's about, but I'm going to use the analogy or framework or perspective of patriarchal systems as us coming out of balance. So, really living in the shadow state. And what this lack of balance offers us is that we've forgotten the sacredness and the importance of the feminine. So, one analogy or metaphor for that is how we treat the planet, the whole climate change movement, environmentalism. It's a return to our inner knowing or our roots or the earth. The earth very much is a metaphor of the body. Another metaphor for forgetting the sacredness of the feminine is, some might say that we have a solar calendar in the West. So actually the Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar. Other cultures and traditions use a lunar calendar. Solar in some respects represents the masculine principle and the lunar represents the feminine principle. Actually, in Kabbalah, when Kabbalah speaks about the time of redemption or the new paradigm or this new era we're moving into, they actually describe it as the return of the feminine. Many traditions do. And so that's really what I want to ground for us. I wouldn't be sitting here with you today if I didn't go on my spiritual journey, and I wouldn't have gone on my spiritual journey if I didn't really feel this deep longing for my inner feminine. So those of you who know me know that I followed a high achiever, overachiever path. I went to great schools. I got into Harvard Business School when I was 21 years old. I matriculated. I started going to school there a few weeks after my 24th birthday. I climbed the ladder. I was a successful executive in the media world, working with CEOs of large public companies, CMOs of every major company, digital tech companies. And while I was still me and I still had my feminine elements or feminine aspects, I was quite over-indexed on my masculine, and not just over-indexed on my masculine. I was really, to succeed in that game and that system, was really embodying what I would call a toxic masculine. And I say toxic masculine with so much love for the masculine and the doing and the linear. I'm going to actually give you some language, symbolism and language for archetypal masculine and feminine. So the masculine is how we do, it's linear, it's how we move forward, it's very phallic, it's the seed, it's the sperm, it's the mountain, the steady mountain that's reaching up. And the feminine is the river reaching down into the earth, right? The masculine principle wants to go to Mars. I sometimes joke, but I think it's an interesting archetypal perspective with all of our tech billionaires building rockets, the most phallic symbol, to outer space. Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk. This idea that world domination isn't enough. The masculine likes to dominate. I don't like the term colonizer. I have a lot of issues with it. I think it's very misused and very connected to the old paradigm that we're leaving behind. That's really the victim oppressor or victim perpetrator. It keeps us in oppression, so I don't use that language. But there is this masculine desire to dominate, which we can also celebrate. I was very ambitious and power hungry. I'm figuring out what that means and looks like now, which is the journey I love to take people on, because there is a lot of truth in who we are. So even if we feel that we were less conscious in older versions of ourselves, there still is a lot of information and essence, our essential self there. So I actually am digressing a little bit, but even when I think about my Harvard Business School application and time there, I was deeply inspired by themes like power and leadership and stewardship and global, I wouldn't call it harmony. I wanted to run a global company and create cross-cultural understanding through that. Now I understand that that was such a big part of my soul, my essence, my essential self, my imprinting, my blueprint. However, now I have more context and new language for it that's not swept up in the old systems or old paradigms. Now I understand that I want to create oneness. I want to create harmony. And I used to think that we do that top down from a macro perspective. But since I've been on my own healing journey and studied the Jungian perspective and depth psychology, I understand how significant each of us are, how powerful, how important we are, that we have a divine spark within us the power within, and that we can move mountains through our personal shift. Even the most subtle personal shift is revolutionary because of the field of energy and the quantum field, which quantum actually means the smallest particle. So when you start to experience the world or the universe, right? Universe, unity, one, as this oneness, this principle of oneness, I'm speaking now with an archetypal lens or a symbolic perspective. When you start to experience the oneness and the wholeness of systems and the universe and our beautiful planet as an ecosystem and our beautiful self and our beautiful body, I started calling myself and my body a heavenly body. That's the term that we use in astrology to refer to the planets and the luminaries, the sun and the moon. Several months ago, when I was tuning in and expressing gratitude and love for myself, the word heavenly body came up. Actually, I wasn't even expressing love and gratitude for myself. I was expressing outward love and gratitude. And then I realized that I'm grateful for the heavenly bodies and I'm grateful for my heavenly body. And we are heavenly bodies. We're very connected to the heavens. And I do believe the body is a pathway, if not the pathway to heaven on earth. So I'm digressing a little bit. I trust in my ability to bring it all home. I hope you're following me and enjoying the journey and the process. I'll share I'll go back to the feminine principle because I don't think I gave all the symbols I really love to share. So I was talking about the masculine being the mountain and the feminine being this river. The feminine is the wild, the chaos, the spiral, the circle and the spiral. So it's not just a circle. She's not linear. She's everywhere. She is moving in a spiral. She is very connected to the symbolism of the moon, right? Which has the dark new moon and the bright illuminated full moon. And that's what the female body connects to, right? The cycle, the hormonal cycle of the feminine, where the new moon, the bleeding is the dark, and the ovulation, the fertile is the round, full moon, the illuminated, the whole. So the feminine principle is very comfortable or connected to shadow. It's maybe possibly because we've really pushed her so far out of our value system and our public life and our public world, which is, I don't like to talk about cause and effect or in the language of cause and effect because I really believe in a quantum reality of wave particle duality, which means that energy is just as significant, if not more significant, than matter. And in the quantum field, time and space are not arbitrary, but I'm trying to think of the right language. In the quantum field, time and space don't matter. They don't exist in a sense. There's a timelessness. And so, without speaking about cause and effect, because the feminine has been hidden or chased out of our, not present in our value system, it's been hard for women who embody feminine qualities to be center stage while keeping their femininity intact. We have some beautiful examples of that. The former Prime Minister of New Zealand comes to mind. And that really is the cultural shift we're living through. So I want to give you another example of the essential self and how our essential self and our soul self are imprinting what we came here. These sacred principles or values or missions that we came here with have always been a part of us. So for me, I ended up going to a women's college, Barnard College at Columbia University, and I used to consider myself not only a feminist, but quite like a raging feminist. And I think if it's okay for me to say, I think I have a soft and gentle touch or approach or atmosphere around me. But I did have a lot of anger and rage in my feminism, and it actually wasn't until I went to Bali after I resigned from my executive role at NBC that I actually came back feeling like it had melted off of me in all the healing and massage and treatments I did. And what I wanted to say is that being at this women's college and really feeling connected to feminism was an unintegrated or less conscious expression of my path now, which is really about, and I really intentionally brought these roses next to me because the rose is one of the most beautiful and ancient symbols of the feminine and the goddess and beauty. And she's a mother spirit in the plant world. She's the queen of all flowers. I work with the rose extensively. And I bring the rose in a lot when I work with women one-on-one and in my group containers. But really, where I've arrived now is this realizing it's part of my essence or my path to restore reverence for the divine feminine. So now I'm introducing even more new language and new archetypal expressions, which is the divine feminine and the divine masculine. Those are other words for the gift or exalted state. In Gene Keys, we talk about the gift state or the siddhi of each gene key. The divine masculine and the divine feminine are the highest expressions of each. They're actually intertwined at the highest state. They're not separate. That's the unity, the divine union that I was speaking about. And now the language that came to me several years ago is really restoring reverence for the divine feminine. So I think there are a few other loose or open threads, and I trust they'll come back, but I want to start softly and delicately moving into the dark feminine and what she represents. At some point, I'm going to share why I'm talking about her today and the astrology of the times that we're living in, more specific to this week and month and year. This threshold we're approaching. It's December 11th today, and we're 10 days out from the winter solstice. These seasonal shifts based on the positions of the sun and the moon are quite ancient. They're really how we used to live on this planet, and reconnecting with them, reconnecting with the earth, with nature, with the cosmos is part of bringing the feminine back in. The collective orientation, the oneness. The feminine principle is also collaborative. It is communal, right? This idea that are even in the female body are if women spend time together, their hormones and their bleeding, their monthly cycles align, they synchronize. So there's something deeply connected about the feminine and the female body, connected to the moon, connected to each other, our wombs. There's a real field there. I'm not saying that there isn't a field for the masculine. He represents another really important principle for us. The steadiness, the firmness, the groundedness, the eye in the storm. The rocket ship is important. The technology we've built, the society we've created is important. We want to honor the masculine. We never want to, if we make one side wrong to bring the other side back in or elevate or exalt the feminine, it's out of balance because the two are intertwined. They're united. They're in divine union at the highest state. So the more we criticize one, the more we get stuck, we damn ourselves into the shadow. So the big part of that is really honoring the divine feminine and the dark feminine and the wildness of the feminine. In astrology, the feminine is represented by Venus, the goddess of so many things. And the goddess, Venus, and the feminine, in her expression of the goddess, is very sensual. It's Taurus, very sensual. It's our relationship to money is feminine. Taurus represents material things, the body, the sensual, the physical. And the feminine's also represented by the moon. The moon represents the mother, our emotional waters. The moon rules Cancer. Venus, the goddess, rules Taurus and also rules Libra. So beauty. Libra's connected to beauty, justice, fairness, balance, harmony. And the moon only rules Cancer. The sun and the moon each rule one sign. The sun rules Leo, my sign. And also my Venus is in Leo. Also my Mars, which rules the masculine, is in Leo. And my mentor and now dear friend, Dr. Lawrence Hillman, really believes, and so do some other famous astrologers like Liz Green, that Pluto represents the feminine, and I agree. Pluto actually represents power. I like to tell people or teach that the planetary symbol or archetype that represents power is feminine because we're so uncomfortable with feminine power in our modern society. And the reason he believes, and I agree, and others believe that Pluto is feminine is that Pluto rules Scorpio, and Pluto is all about death and rebirth. And the feminine, as modeled in our hormones and our cycle, is about death and rebirth, and also we give birth. And the feminine every month dies and is reborn in a way. We're more comfortable with that principle. We embody it. The moon embodies it in a way. So Pluto really represents rebirth, transformation, which feels like a feminine principle, and power. I can't think of a better archetypal expression of power than Mother Nature. The storm, the volcano, the tsunamis, the natural, what we call disaster, these big events, wildfires, can feel very feminine. And now actually we're just organically getting into the dark and the wild feminine, right? Wildfires. I'm 70% fire, astrologically in terms of the elements. And yeah, this innate wildness, this howling at the moon, the chaos, the chaos and the void that are such important parts of creation. You need the void, you need the womb space, you need the chaos for creation. Think of the process for many artists or any art form, really. What else can I say about the dark feminine? Really about going into the depth psychology, the mythology of Persephone, Demeter's daughter. Demeter is really the earth mother. Persephone is her daughter, and Hades takes her to the underworld. So she spends part of the year, several seasons like winter, in the underworld. So this feminine comfort with the depths, right? As women who carry babies, we can experience a lot of loss, right? Whether it's the miscarriages, abortions, a lot of different forms of loss and death. And the feminine body has seasons every month. And all of us, the feminine principle has seasons. So the masculine principle is steady and moves forward, right? The same amount of testosterone every day. The feminine principle has seasons. The hormones shift week to week, and all of us have seasons. We're all microcosms of the macrocosm. Fun fact, I didn't know that microcosm and macrocosm come from cosmos. So we really are this microcosm of the world, and our bodies really are an expression of the earth. Dark feminine can also be winter or the void or the famine. this principle of cyclicality, this principle of the harvest, this principle of change, of movement, of cycles. Okay, so I'm back, and I'm back after a little break. My body wanted to press pause, which she's been kind of asking for a lot more recently. And there's so much I can say about that, but it feels very connected to what I've been experiencing and moving through, and really what I wanted to capture or speak about today. Really, our relationship with our bodies and this feminine urge to not be suppressed, and this feminine urge of being untamed, the wild feminine. And I think for me personally, I mean, I know coming from the culture I came from, the cultures, I should say, I grew up as the daughter of two beautiful Persian Jewish immigrants from different parts of Iran. And between the Middle Eastern culture, even elements of the Jewish culture, and the New York culture, and the being a woman in the business world, I felt a lot of, I don't know if pressure is the right word, a lot of impetus to be contained and to suppress what I'm feeling. And even I feel my body was rebelling just now because I was being so methodical about how I was sharing. And really, I am it's funny to characterize it this way because I feel like I've done so much of this rewilding and connecting to my essential nature and healing. And I'm really feeling a deeper push and healing into being less composed and allowing for more messiness. And I think as a woman, not just as a woman, but just who I was and the time I was living in and the career I was having, I almost traded off of my ability to be contained. And I know I actually did. I not only traded off my ability to be contained, I traded off my ability to suppress my needs. And I'm actually like feeling the anger in my body arise as I speak about this, as I speak into this. You know, I was the chief of staff for over 2 years to a senior executive who kind of fed off of that. Not that this is about this other person, it's about me. And I did fantastic things and got really far ahead by suppressing my needs, so much so that it got to a point where I would even think about, I would joke with friends about this, that a female body has a period and is bleeding for several days and is literally expected to be bleeding out of one of the most vulnerable, sensitive, tender parts of her body and still show up to work at the same time, run board meetings, finish presentations. And I've become kind of, you're feeling the anger. It's like, for those of you who know who Sekhmet is, it's very Sekhmet energy. She's a goddess from I can't even, definitely ancient Egypt, but also other cultures, I believe. And she has this sacred rage. It's the head of a lion or lioness, rather, in the body of a woman. So I've worked a lot with Sekhmet, and I do have this anger, and I do feel myself like I actually do have my body isn't and doesn't want me to express it in the same way, but let's say I have an appreciation for my composure, or maybe not my composure, how presentable I can be. So let's say I have an appreciation for how presentable I can be and what that gets me, but really it comes back to the performance culture and performing, and I'm in a really deep portal with myself and my body that there's so much I could say. I don't think I'm ready or willing to go into it that deeply. Let's see. But with how much I'm performing, and not just performing, it's a different way of relating. It's a different orientation to our bodies. And this really powerful reframe came to me, really, and the reframe was that our bodies aren't along for the ride. They're not something we can or must overcome to get to where we need to be, to accomplish what we want. I mean, talk about conscious conception and the journey of conceiving between two opposite sexes. And really, for me, I've been feeling the pressure and the masculine principle and then the feminine principle and the discomfort with a medical system that really ignores or denies the mystery and the magic of it all. And I'm on this adventure, this new adventure in a way, and I'm meeting these parts of myself, the deeper layers. I'm meeting the deeper layers of my orientation, of performance, of wanting to perform or suppressing a bodily feeling or nudge or need to get to where I want to be, to achieve my goals. And recently I started working with a coach, which I'm really struggle with the language of coach and that idea, but she really came to me and found me, and she speaks a beautiful language of the feminine, of pleasure, and the message from my body has been loud and clear. My body doesn't want my mind to dictate what I'm doing, my life, my choices, my posture anymore. And the powerful line that came through me last week is that our bodies aren't along for the ride. Our bodies are the ride. Our bodies are the ride. Our bodies are why we came here to this planet, to Earth. Earth is one of the most beautiful, beautiful places in the universe. We really won the lottery at a soul level to come down here. And we came down here to feel everything. We didn't come down here to win the lottery. Maybe some of us did. We didn't come down here to build a business and exit it. Maybe some of us did. We came down here to feel things. And the fact that and I myself, but we have become so avoidant of that, so avoidant, so numb to what we're feeling, so avoidant, so allergic, even in some cases, if I want to be really harsh. And they're called feelings because they're meant to be felt. And somehow we've become so uncomfortable with that. And I see it in myself in a very micro movement level. There's a lot more to this story. As I shared, it's very much connected to my life path and the symbolism around who I am or what I came here to heal, what I came here to feel. And I'm actually experiencing this tension in real time as I record the podcast between my brain and my mind that's firing very quickly and wants to show off or at least share all of the connections and symbolism. And wow, I'm tempted to take it in 30 different directions. all the powerful interconnectedness and meaning behind it, and my body just doesn't care. It's not that she doesn't care. She speaks louder than words. And it's really humbling. It makes me emotional to really accept that my body speaks louder than words, and to accept or have the humility to bow my head in reverence to her intelligence, to her wisdom. And sometimes it takes illness or breakdown or some sort of halting in the body for us to wake up to who we are and her power and her perfection. I'm just thinking, I'm just feel so humbled, and reminds me of in my yoga practice, this bowing the head to the heart, this this other way of being. And I've been on a journey with my body for sure, and with my composure for sure, and with beauty for sure. This resenting beauty or the need to be pampered or primmed or manicured or presentable, and really appreciating beauty and how it feels somatically in my body to put myself together, and that when my body feels cared for, when she feels loved, when she feels appreciated. And it's very simple. It's not The body isn't as complex as the mind or the ego. I'm still feeling like a tremendous temptation to go back into the mind and the brain and teach and lay out all the symbolism. And my body, yeah, she has a different story to tell. And I think just being with her, loving on her, appreciating her, and blessing her is really the message I want to share today here. And I do run moon circles for women when I can, and this energy is really present. I'm realizing of blessing ourselves, blessing our bodies, blessing each other. And it's something I want to do more of and really figure out the, not quite pecking order, but the really creating more plasticity in a way, or more flexibility in terms of how and who is leading and how they're in communication, my mind and my body and my soul. So, in a way, I feel that we're just scratching the surface in this conversation. And I think the surface and the skin, the surface is where we need to be. I think there's one more thing I want to share about the body, which is that when I mention how my body is asking for space and time and really to lead, I was guided to research or look into this idea of neurons and neural plasticity and neural pathways. And when I did that, and I'm familiar with neural pathways and neuroplasticity and Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, and I was kind of shocked and surprised when I looked up a neuron that it's not something that only exists in the brain, that neural pathways actually move between the brain and the mind and the head and the body. And I read this like incredible language about it, about these different pathways, ascending pathways and descending pathways. And the simplified version of it is that ascending pathways carry sensation, intelligence, information that we get through sensation up to the mind, up to the brain. So there's different examples of that: fine touch, heat, temperature, warmth, proprioception, so our limbs and our bodies being able to tell where they are, feel where they are rather, in space. And then there's descending pathways. And the descending pathways are literally commands from the brain to the body. Now, there's a lot of symbolism in that language for people who are interested or excited about the idea of ascension, but I felt like I was receiving this entire reframe and just the importance of the ascending pathways. And it was almost like my body was protesting the commands from the brain, from the descending pathways. And I've just been in this portal of being with that, of sitting with this awareness, this awakening that our bodies are the ride. We came here to feel, for sensation, for sensual delight. And how important sensation is. I have a lot more I can trip on and like nerd out about, but really I want to bring it back to the body and the feeling state. And also even honor and appreciate my body for making me stop and pause and come back to my senses. It's a funny phrase. How funny that we say come back to our senses as if it's a mental or logical thing, but really reclaiming that's a powerful reframe, coming back to our senses of knowing what's right, our intuition. And so I had all these other thoughts about the astrology that I wanted to share, and I'm just going to check in to see if that is available. Okay, I'm receiving that it's not available right now. That it can or maybe will take, yeah, it may take me out of my feeling state. So I want to leave you with just the power of that phrase, of that being, just the awareness of the beautiful mythology and power and gift of the Lilith and the dark feminine. As always, I invite people into my practice. I find that one-on-one sessions can really be powerful, really life-changing, really game-changing. We do some of these reframes together for you in your life, either working with your chart or in my private mentorship. And if you're listening to this now in December, I'm thinking about opening up some more space in my one-on-one practice. So definitely check that out on my link tree, on my website, which is linked below. And wishing you guys so much sensuality, so much sensation. I'm wishing you to come back to your senses, to feel the power and the gift and the centricity of your bodies in this life. And I can't wait to speak again. Sending love.